We're not really discussing that, though.
No, I'm saying that they're actually executing the decision already.
Yeah, well, but they're executing the decision at the behest of the husband, though. That right? So this is the consent of the husband essentially is going into this decision-making, meaning she's doing the day-to-day activities because he's saying you should do these day-to-day activities, right?
We're diving into this wild debate where Andrew Wilson absolutely schools a panel full of confused, woke feminists. I mean, seriously, he walks them straight into a corner with calm, sharp logic while they're fumbling around with vague, overcomplicated nonsense. Andrew Wilson is in full beast mode here, cutting through the fluff, staying on point, and making sure the conversation doesn't get lost in all these weird semantics games. Let's hear what Andrew Wilson has to say.
I think you already kind of talked about it. Ayla, I guess your position on this topic, if you want to elaborate a bit.
Well, I just don't know what should means. Like, should for what purpose?
What do you mean?
Like, should you jump up and down? And I'm like, well, should you do that in order to achieve what goal? Like, shoulds are a contingent.
He doesn't mean should is like an ought. He's talking in the comments. So when you're talking about like should, and you're doing the little like Hetzberg thing, I know exactly what you're doing. It's a very low tier form of philosophy. He's saying should in the comments. He's not saying should as an ought statement of a moral imperative.
What is a slightly higher tier of philosophy that you would recommend I try?
Well, I would start with understanding that you're not in a philosophical engagement at the moment, unless you see everything purely as a philosophical engagement, and that you would have to agree with me that you distinguish between words in the commons and you distinguish between words which have philosophical terms. So if somebody's engaging with you, for instance, a medical doctor or a lawyer, they're going to use legal terms or medical terms. They're going to have a different meaning than the common terms of those words or the philosophical terms. So when you say, I don't know what should means, I actually don't believe you in this context. I think you know exactly what he means by should.
This is the way that I talk all the time, and sort of the question that I would ask anytime somebody asks me if somebody should do anything.
Yeah, and I just explained to you that there's a distinction here.
I still don't understand what should means in this context. So
what does should mean in any context?
Well, it's usually dependent on something, right?
Okay.
Like, should I go to the store? I'm like, well, if you're hungry.
So dependent on this context, what do you think should means?
Like, my guess is probably there's some implicit, like, to be happy kind of thing, but I don't know if this is true.
Well, then we'll go with that.
I would like to check, though. Like, is that what we mean? Because if so, then I can answer.
Yeah, so can you even repeat what the question was?
But it's also different because sometimes people argue the purpose of like some types of social structures is not to be happy, but rather to have like a flourishing society or something.
Yeah,
which is,
I'm fine getting into semantics with you when it comes to should, but can you repeat what the question even was?
Should men lead their wives or some variation on that?
Yeah, so he's asking from your worldview, whatever that is. I believe you say that you're a rationalist, so from whatever your rational worldview is, the should sense here is ought they or ought they not lead wives?
For what purpose? I can't get over the what purpose. Like for happiness, I think probably a lot of people would be happier if their husbands led them. This seems true.
Okay.
I don't think I would be that much happier, but I am not normal.
Okay, so then should they or should they not? Ought they or ought they not? For the purpose of happiness.
Yeah. So this is classic Andrew Wilson, straight up trying to simplify it for them, but they're dodging like crazy. I mean, come on, it's not rocket science. He's saying, from your worldview, and they're still circling around. Andrew Wilson is basically spoon-feeding the question, and still, they're not answering it.
You sound very confident in the things that you say, but I'm not sure that makes you more right.
It doesn't make you more right because you don't understand the things I say either. So I would just like an answer when you're talking about ought or ought not. Ought they or ought they not for the purpose of happiness?
I can't answer. I mean, maybe I'm very stupid, and maybe you could explain this to me. But you're saying ought is a common use.
I'll use really small words.
Yeah, we can use very small baby words for me, because my small little brain has difficulty sometimes. But when you're saying ought they lead their wives, do you mean that there's like a general sort of way that the world is good if it is and bad if it isn't, and you're referring to like a general sense of goodness?
No, I'm not inferring or making an implication for anything. This is an askance from the worldview of you, who is not me. Whatever your worldview is, who is not me, from your worldview that is not mine, ought men lead their wives?
I well, I'm trying to communicate my view, and my view is something like, I think that some people would be happier if their husbands let them, and some people would be sadder if their husbands let them. I'm not sure that there's such a thing as an overarching goodness, so I don't really...
Got it. Okay, so sometimes. Thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying.
Well, that was an interesting exchange. I do have a question related to this, though, to, again, perhaps get to the heart of the issue. Who gets final say? So in a relationship or a marriage, whatever, let's say there's some sort of impasse. There is no resolution. You can't come, you want one thing, he wants the other. Who should get final say?
Whoever pays.
Hold on. So, and I think, Andrew, sometimes you refer to this as a threshold breaker, I think, but who do you think gets final say? Or would you, I guess, either in your own dynamics, who should get final say? What do you think? Starting with you, Ayla.
Like, it depends on the thing? I'm confused.
Sure.
Like, if you're disagreeing over, like, where should we move?
Sure.
I don't know, probably you should bet on it, or, like, see who would want to pay more given that you had the money, or make prediction markets to figure out. I don't know. I don't think I operate by these norms, but I know a lot of people do.
Sure. What do you think?
I think it's going to depend on the situation. Obviously, you have to respect the person that you're with. So to do something that is going to damage the relationship or blatantly disrespect the other person's not going to end up, you're not going to end up with a thriving relationship. But it's like nothing's without consequence at the same time. So it's trusting your gut. Like if you trust your husband fully and he's like, this is a terrible idea, maybe consider the option that you're wrong and that he's right, and vice versa. So if you're telling him not to do something, and this happens a lot, if you talk to anyone in business, the wife will be like, that person had a really sketchy feeling, I don't think that this investment is good. The dude ignores the woman's intuition and the thing just like crumbles, right? So it's looking at the history of the relationship too. It's like, how often has he been right about this thing and you've been wrong, and vice versa.
Andrew, if I have you jump in really quick, do you want to provide like maybe a good example of like a impasse sort of situation that could arise in like a relationship or marriage, just for use as an example here?
Well, I mean, a very common one is just money. So the idea of how money is used or spent in a relationship versus not spent in a relationship is one of the number one disagreements that men and women have.
Yeah, so, I mean, Andrew Wilson nails it here. Like, this is real life. Money is such a big deal in relationships, and Andrew Wilson just puts it out there plain and simple. No dodging, no weird theories. Just straight up facts. That's what makes Andrew Wilson so solid in debates like this.
So the idea is, if you can't come to an agreement on how money is spent or what school the kid should go to, which might infer spending money as well, right? Ultimately, there's only two of you, right? So either a third party has to break this threshold barrier, or one of you ultimately has to be the decider. Otherwise, how do you essentially how do you come to an agreement if both of you disagree? Like how is that done if one person ultimately doesn't end up with the final say?
I don't think one person holds that position permanently. So, and then it's also going to be who acts on it first. So typically women are the ones that set all of the appointments, pay the school tuition if they're going to a private school, set up the doctor's appointments. They make 60 to 80% of all of the household purchases. So if you're just looking at behavior, you'd say women are, but that could be the man saying no and they're just making that decision anyways. So
I'm not really sure that any of that would matter, though. So I understand
well,
what you're
it's
saying.
what's being acted on right now, right? So like whether or not that's right or that's helpful for a healthy relationship, like that's a whole different conversation. But what is happening is women are.
Right, I'm not sure it's actually pertinent to what I'm saying, though. So I understand what your position is. You're saying, hey, look, women already have lots of household responsibilities, and so they're in a decision-making role already. We're not really discussing that, though.
No, I'm saying that they're actually executing the decision already.
Yeah, well, but they're executing the decision at the behest of the husband, though. That right? So this is the consent of the husband essentially is going into this decision-making, meaning she's doing the day-to-day activities because he's saying you should do these day-to-day activities, right? He doesn't have any disagreement. It's when there's disagreement within that, who becomes the arbiter then? How do we find this threshold breaker between two people for who makes the determination or who has the ultimate say?
Again, I don't think anyone holds that permanently, so it's trusting your partner. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. Well, okay. if they don't hold it permanently, right? But let's say the man considers himself to be in the position of authority, and has been in the position of authority, right? This still doesn't really get to the heart of the question of if there's a disagreement and they can't reconcile it. You say, well, the man doesn't hold that permanently. It's like, okay, great. But what I'm saying is when you can't reconcile the disagreement, you both disagree, who gets to ultimately make the decision? Whether you think that it's a permanent basis for a man to be in control of it or not, I'm not even sure that's relevant, really.
Andrew Wilson is being super patient here, like more patient than I'd be, for sure. He's sticking to the actual question, but they're still trying to wiggle out of it. Andrew Wilson is basically saying, who decides when you both just can't agree? And somehow they're acting like that's a trick question. Come on now.
Well, because the question seems that it's permanent, so maybe I'm misunderstanding it. But if you're saying who's in charge and who is responsible for the deal breaker, that sounds like who is always responsible for the deal breaker.
No, not really.
Okay.
So what the question is asking is if two people, since most relationships anyway are two people. I understand that there's polyamorous people here and this type of thing, but that's outside of what you would consider the norm for society. It's usually man, woman, that's it, right? And people generally tend to not like to share their partners. You can dispute why that is, sexual liberation, whatever, but it is a fact that most people are in monogamous relationships, one man, one woman, most. That's globally. That's not even just in the West. So if that is the case and you have a disagreement, can't reconcile it, right? How do you figure out who ultimately is going to have the say?
Andrew Wilson just completely dismantled this whole panel step by step with nothing but calm, sharp logic. No shouting, no drama, just facts and clear thinking. The whole time, Andrew Wilson keeps his cool while the panel is stuck in circles, throwing out weak answers and dodging basic questions. Andrew Wilson didn't just participate, he dominated this conversation, proving again why he's one of the sharpest voices in these debates.